Good morning and welcome to another episode of the Quarantine Leadership Series, where we hope to motivate, inspire, and encourage your leadership. I'm joined today by a great friend, Paul McEntire, who's had a long, distinguished YMCA career as a CEO and as a COO of some of the largest YMCAs in the country, and also with YMCA of the USA. So, Paul, thank you for joining us.
Glad to be here.
Yeah. I've been watching you. You're starting to talk a little bit on social media, on LinkedIn. Let's just jump right in and talk about second chair leadership. So define that for us. What is second chair leadership?
Yeah, I actually began thinking about it probably 20 years ago almost, and came up with that phrase probably from my very limited music background. I think I was a seventh chair trumpet player in the middle school band, only because there was only seven trumpet players. But it's my understanding of some personal experiences, obviously, but also watching others, of being in a role in a organization where there is a primary named leader, and you're not that person, but have, if not literally, a very significant second role to that person. And how do the two work together? What happens when there are difficulties or conflicts? How do you maximize the organization from that seat?
That's so important. I'm an old coach, and I wanted to coach early in my career, and had a lot of discussions. And I was an assistant coach about how to be a good assistant, to the head coach.
Yeah.
What's it like? So one of the comments that you made was regular and open communication. What's that look like for you as a second chair?
Yeah, in my mind, I think, learned to break it down into a couple of different components. One of them are those completely private conversations that you have, where if it's an ideal relationship or something close to it, you're completely transparent with the good, the bad, and the ugly. And then there's the situations where you're either together or separately out communicating in a more public way, or whether that's with staff or whatever, where you need to be consistent in what you say, and maybe with a little different focus, but so that the same message is getting there. To me, when I was in those second roles, if someone knew they could count on me saying something, meaning the organization had spoken because I was well enough aligned with the primary leader, that's what I was looking for. But you always won't agree with each other, and I have seen situations where sometimes the number two person was having to speak publicly when there were questions about the number one leader, and you can't not say something in those situations. Sometimes you have to be loyal. I think that's incredibly important. But if you're not honest, people are going to see through that too. So truthfully, those are really can be complicated situations of how to deal with reality if it's not ideal.
Yeah. I've always wanted, and I can think of a case where, hey, we can disagree. And like some of the best people that have ever worked for me, we could really disagree in my office about a topic. And I always shared, I said, I would follow their lead 60% of the time, probably 70% of the time. But when I pulled the CEO card out and said, no, this is the way we're going to do it, even if they disagreed, they walked outside the door and executed it like we were in lockstep. And there's not enough money in the world to pay for that. They gave me their opinion, but I knew outside my office we were on the same page and they were executing perfectly.
Yeah, if you look at leaders that fail, often it's that they don't give freedom to that second cheerleader in private to speak the truth to them. So they end up getting in a situation where they think everything they do and think is right, and there's someone right there that knows it's not, but they don't give the freedom to speak up.
When you were a CEO, what was your meeting schedule with your number two? Hey, every Tuesday morning or what's a good schedule for you to follow?
Yeah, I'm, for some reason, a little unique. I don't have a cadence that I personally prefer. And so the situations I was in, especially in the large organizations, there would have really been a couple of people, and I'm not sure there would have been a clear number two, but I let them pick the cadence that was good for them. And they pick different sometimes. Some like the regularity of short, either weekly or biweekly meetings. Others liked the open door concept. Back then, we were in the same office building more, so that was an option. That may not always be an option in today's world with virtual workplaces and all. But I think there needs to be those quick check-in communication options somehow, whether that's, by phone or whatever. But then there need to be times of deeper conversation, especially if there are issues that you're trying to work through and get consensus with each other on. And to your point, even if you've got someone that's not 100% sure they agree with you, when the decision's made and they're going to, you want them not only to understand the decision, but the why of the decision, so that when they're representing you, they communicate the why in a very similar way to how you would.
Yeah, yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, I'm one of those that I like. Hey, we're going to meet face to face. Every other Tuesday. This time, coffee shop, wherever it would be.
Yeah.
I have a routine where one meeting is in a coffee shop, one meeting is in the office. So
Yeah,
one's a little bit more relaxed, one may be a little bit more formal. Kind of
that works.
so we can just communicate. And be honest and give some time for them to debate if they need to debate on an issue or. I heard the sermon one time. It was about coaching up, and so I
Yeah.
like to hear that. I've had some great staff that have coached up to me a lot. So tell me about the dynamic where maybe the CEO and the number two, or even that team, they're not close personally. Maybe they're not. I've been blessed to have people I worked with that some of my best friends are close to relationally. What are some of the ways to build trust and effectiveness when you're not particularly close to your boss?
Yeah, I've been in situations where most of them where I would identify as being in the second seat. I would not say I was a close personal friend of the lead person. I had a strong relationship with them. I do think it's extremely beneficial if you know each other beyond the workplace. And that doesn't necessarily mean you're hanging out every weekend or anything, but you know each other's family, you know the things that you like to do. I think that helps enormously with trust once you see how one another function at places outside of the workplace. You can get to really see a person's character when you see them with family, with friends, and community settings. And so I do think a close relationship is critical. My personal experience is it doesn't necessarily have to be a friendship type relationship.
Yeah. But there has to be some time where y'all in these discussions where you are checking in with, how are your kids? As we talked before, you're looking after your parent. How's that going?
Right. Yeah, because that's a real part of people's lives, of the stresses that they're dealing with. And so if we don't understand that about one another, I think no matter how good the relationships, there's times when you'll need to extend grace to one another, and we don't all have our best days. I had someone say to me recently, I had a situation with my staff where everybody seemed to be having their worst day on the same day. Those obviously aren't good days, but we all have our days. And again, the deeper you know the reality of someone's life, I think the easier it is to extend grace when it's needed. And no relationship's going to survive well without grace being extended pretty regularly.
I love also another one of your comments was about when the leader has a lot of arrogance or hubris, being old. I tell a lot of people, I said, I've learned that anytime I get a little full of myself, I'm smacked into reality. So I've learned to be more even keel the more experience I get. And I've had some older mentors that have coached me through that. But so for a number two, and listen, I want to play both sides of this. For when your boss is not arrogant, has a lot of pride and hubris, how do you deal with that and manage that?
Yeah,
Or
I
help
think
give a
that
reality
was what
check.
Yeah, that was one thing that really surprised me as a young YMCA staff person. And fortunately, probably only in one situation, real up close and personal, and others from a distance, that there would be people that would derail themselves just by thinking too highly of themselves and not having corrective measures around them and buffers and all of that. Because if you get yourself into that situation, it affects not only your relationship with your key staff, but it probably affects how you're relating to your board, how you're presenting yourself in the community. And most of us are pretty quick at seeing through things like that. And those can be challenging because the very idea that the person has puffed themselves up beyond what they really are can make it hard to confront them. I can recall a couple myself, very, very difficult personal conversations. And frankly, a couple of them did not work. and a couple of them ended up going better than I might would have thought they would. But again, that's where knowing each other and having enough trust that you can speak what you see as the truth into the situation, because it's usually hurting the leader in ways they don't even realize. That's been my experience, that that more humble approach endears you to your staff, because they see you as someone that's kind of grounded. But because the reality is, a strong leader needs a certain amount of ego and confidence. You just do. You're
Oh, yeah.
making big decisions, and sometimes you're out on an island by yourself, and there's no way not to be, and you have to make a decision. So, we can't be milk toast for sure. So we need to find the balance. I probably learned early in my career, maybe a little bit of an old book now, but Jim Collins' Good to Great book talked about level 5 leaders, and his hard academic research showed that those that had that strong confidence and yet a genuine, not a fake humility, but a genuine humility, were the ones that performed the best over time.
Yeah, just I hired somebody back, and he went back and made his team reread that book. People don't like to read as much, I guess. They wanted the books on tape. He bought books for all of them, but it was about that chapter. He really was into the level 5 leader. So that's a great book to revisit. What about down? What about when our number 2 you feel like is a little too full of themselves, and you need to give them a reality check?
Yeah, I think I don't recall situations that I had to deal with that directly, but I have given that a little bit of thought. And I, I think sometimes you can be direct, but sometimes you can give them challenging situations, to your point, where you're almost certain they're going to get slapped down eventually. Because sometimes we get early in our career in those situations because all we accept are opportunities that are frankly fairly easy. If I had to go back and do a few things differently in my life and career, I probably would seek a few more challenges than I did. I might have been better off, and organizations I work with might have been, if I'd have maybe even failed a few more times because I was trying more difficult things. And so, um, help them get into situations, and even people working for them. I remember it wasn't so much full of themselves, but I had a staff member that I thought took too much responsibility for everything that happened underneath them. And so I gave them a person to report to them that I knew would challenge them, was a little more mature, frankly, and would speak up more than they were used to their staff speaking up. And I told the one, I said, "Look, my next meeting is with this person, and I'm going to tell them to speak their mind when they're with you, obviously respectfully." And then went to the next person's office and said, "Look, I've got you in this reporting relationship because I think you'll benefit, because it's a strong person you're working for, but I think you can help them because I know you'll speak your mind."
Yeah, that's great. That's great stuff. Again, it's just that trust and being able to communicate that to each other, and to be able to coach up, coach down, communicate that. Hey, I'm just trying to make you better. Let me give you some advice. Here's where I failed or I've fallen. Those kinds of things. A lot of people that listen to this, Paul, are branch executives, or maybe even younger associate executives that aspire to be a branch exec, a VP, a YCEO, hopefully down the road. What advice would you give that young, eager associate exec that's looking to move up, of being a more effective number 2 to their boss?
Yeah, I think the first thing, and this advice has served me well. I don't remember who gave it to me, but I've repeated this for probably 20, 25 years now. But focus on being the absolute best in whatever position you're in now. Don't get looking so far ahead or up the ladder that you're positioning or doing things that you think will help make that happen. Nothing's going to make that happen quicker than being a big success in whatever you've been asked to do now. I do think that you can volunteer for opportunities that come along. Sometimes we have that. You can let people know that if you feel like you're doing well, you've got extra capacity in your job, but don't overstep your bounds, and realize that if whoever your supervisor is, whatever the structure of your organization is, if the organization succeeds and that person succeeds, you're all going to get credit for it. And so try not to worry as much about that happening day to day, and just knowing at the end of the day, we win together by working together. And that if I can help my boss succeed, ultimately that's going to be to my benefit, because Most people see things pretty clearly and they know who play what roles, and they'll divvy up the credit in their own mind as they assign it. You don't need to be the one to try to point fingers at yourself that you were maybe more responsible than you really were.
Yeah. I love that about helping your boss succeed, and having some type of intrinsic motivation. You may not get credit sometimes, but knowing that you had a role in it. When I was coaching, the best advice that the coaches say, a good assistant coach is in the head coach's ear going, hey, we need to go to zone. We need to switch to zone. And finally, about 2 quarters later, the coach switches to zone and it works. And you got to look in his ear and go, great idea, coach. That was a great idea. Way to go. Even though you've been whispering it to him for 2 quarters, that's the key to a good assistant
Exactly,
coach.
for sure.
Yeah. So, off script a little bit for us, the trends are not where the 22-year-old is a program director and a 27-year-old associate exec, or they're not moving up the ladder. And so we're bringing people in from the side. I mean, does that concern you as somebody that's had a little bit of that career trajectory? How are we developing, or how should we look to develop?
Yeah, I think we really need to maybe not focus on a pure ladder going up, but what are the experiences and
Yeah.
opportunities that people need? I mean, I'll go to one really specific one in Houston. We came to a decision, our leadership team, that we needed to do some lateral transfers. It was a fairly new concept to some of us that an outside person had brought in. And when we first proposed it to 6 different people to go to positions where there was no title change and frankly, no salary change, um, there was a good bit of resistance. And to be fair, a couple of them had to commute, 15, 20, 30 minutes farther to be able to do that. But a year later, 4 of those 6 people received promotions. Now we got them standing in line wanting to know, they don't even know how to pronounce lateral transfer, but they know they want one, right? So I think it's those kind of experiences and not getting as hung up in titles. The other thing even earlier in my career, and this is hard because some of us aren't cut out to do this. The lingo back then, this was in my Jacksonville years, was matrix management. And it's where there weren't clear lines of authority. There was way more teamwork sideways. And some people are really good at that. Others, frankly, it's just not hard and crisp enough for them they like the one boss, one thing, and that's all I have to worry about. Whereas, maybe on childcare, I'm reporting over here, and on sports, I'm over here. But if we can get ourselves to take on a more complex structure like that, then we're getting input, and we're serving as number 2 to 3, 4 different people. There's huge growth for everyone, even though it's a more complex system to work in. So I'm a big believer in that, but I realize it's not for everyone.
Well, I'm from a small Y, and you have to do that to cover a lot of things. People have to
Exactly.
have multiple jobs, and it is hard and difficult. And so that's a great, great comment. Um, uh, Last question: who's been your mentor and been a great force in your career?
Yeah, so I'm got 3 people that I always think about, and this I'll offer as a suggestion to folks. One of them passed away about a year and a half ago. It was from my years as being a pastor. He was actually my family's pastor when I was in high school. And he had gone to live by one of his children as he got over 90. And I took the time to write him a long email letter. And I felt good just doing it. But then when I heard about how it made him feel, I was really happy I had taken the time to do that. So he's one that gave me what he taught me is he gave me responsibility that I couldn't handle and wasn't ready for. He saw in me things I didn't see in myself yet. He made me in charge of a couple of significant committees in the organization he was the executive director of. And he probably babysat me more than I knew. But taught me, hey, stretch people by giving them opportunities. And then, some of your listeners will know Tom Massey. He was a member of my church. Is actually how I came to work for the Y. A long story I won't get into now, but just sort of his down to earthness over the years, and always knowing he had my best interest at heart. Big decisions I've made, I've always wanted his input on it. And then another one that a few people will know in the last 7 or 8 years has been very impactful is Bob Noling, who comes from the corporate world but grew up in the Y in Muncie, Indiana, and has been on the Y boards in Indianapolis and Chicago. I used him as a coach the last 7 or 8 years, and a very different perspective than why people have. And so he stretched me and taught me things I would have never learned without him.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for sharing your wisdom and your experience with us. I hope that if you're watching this, that you'll take time to take these nuggets and let it create discussions with your team. Encourage some of your people to watch. Encourage your boss to watch, or encourage your person that reports to your coordinator to watch. If you're a program aquatics director, let your aquatics coordinator watch this with you. But thanks again for your time and example and leadership. Thanks everybody that's watched. Make sure you subscribe to this channel, and always remember to lead with love. Paul, thank you again.
Great. Thanks, Cam.